One lie on your gun purchase form, even if you didn't know it was a lie, and you're facing 10 years in federal prison and a $250,000 fine. Today, I'm breaking down 9 devastating gun purchasing mistakes that could cost first-time buyers their freedom. By the end of this video, you'll know exactly how to buy your first firearm legally and avoid the traps that send law-abiding citizens to court. Just this year, federal prosecutors charged dozens of first-time gun buyers with felonies for mistakes they made during the purchase process. We're talking about people who thought they were following the rules. Some are now serving prison time. Others lost their right to own guns forever. This is happening right now, and if you're planning to buy your first firearm, you need to know these mistakes before you walk into that gun store. Number 1. Lying on ATF Form 4473 even if you don't realize you're lying. You're at the gun counter, filling out the federal background check form. Question 11C asks if you're an unlawful user of marijuana or any controlled substance. You smoked marijuana last month in a state where it's legal, so you check no because you think state legalization makes it lawful. That single checkmark just became a federal felony. Under 18 U.S.C. 922(6), any false statement on Form 4473 is a crime regardless of whether you understood the question. The penalty? Up to 10 years in federal prison and a $250,000 fine. Federal prosecutors don't care if it was an honest mistake. They don't care if you're a first-time buyer. In 2024, the ATF referred hundreds of these cases for prosecution, and judges are handing down real prison sentences. This isn't a warning, it's a felony conviction that destroys your life. Here's how to stay legal. First, understand that marijuana is still federally illegal, even in states where it's legal. If you've used it recently, you cannot legally purchase a firearm, period. Second, read every question on Form 4473 twice before answering. Third, if you're unsure about any question, ask the dealer to explain it before you answer. Fourth, never let someone else tell you what to write. Your answers must reflect your actual status. And fifth, if you've had any past drug use, criminal charges, restraining orders, or mental health commitments, consult a gun rights attorney before attempting to purchase. But lying on the form isn't the only way first-time buyers end up in federal custody. This next mistake involves someone else's money. Number 2. Making a straw purchase, buying a gun for someone else who gives you the money. Your friend can't pass a background check, so he hands you cash and asks you to buy a gun for him. Or your uncle wants to surprise your cousin with a gun for his birthday and gives you money to purchase it in your name. Both scenarios are federal felonies called straw purchases. Under 18 U.S.C. 922(6) and 932, you're lying about being the actual buyer on Form 4473. It doesn't matter if the other person could legally own a gun. It doesn't matter if you're trying to help your family. The moment you use someone else's money to buy a gun you're giving to them, you've committed a federal crime. Straw purchases carry 10 to 15 years in federal prison and up to $250,000 in fines. If that gun is later used in a crime, you're looking at up to 25 years. The ATF actively investigates straw purchases, and they will trace that gun back to you. In 2023, federal courts sentenced multiple first-time offenders to multi-year prison terms for straw purchases. Here's the legal way to handle this. If you want to buy a gun as a gift, you must use your own money, and the recipient must be legally allowed to own firearms. You cannot accept reimbursement. If someone asks you to buy a gun for them, the answer is always no. Direct them to purchase it themselves. If you're buying for yourself but someone offered to help with money, politely decline and save up on your own. The only exception is if you're buying as a bona fide gift using entirely your own funds with no expectation of repayment. Document this, keep receipts showing you paid with your money, and if questioned later, you can prove it was a legitimate gift. Never, under any circumstances, accept money from someone else to purchase a firearm they'll receive. Straw purchases land people in federal prison, but this next mistake happens at the moment of purchase, and most first-time buyers have no idea it's illegal. Number 3. Attempting to purchase a firearm while you're under a restraining order or protection order. You're going through a divorce or custody battle. Your ex filed a restraining order against you. Maybe it's legitimate, maybe it's not. You think, I need to protect myself, so I'll buy a gun. You walk into a gun store, fill out Form 4473, and the background check comes back denied. But here's where it gets dangerous. Some first-time buyers don't disclose the restraining order on the form, thinking it's temporary or unjustified. Under federal law, specifically 18 U.S.C. 922 G8. If you're subject to a qualifying restraining order, you're prohibited from purchasing or possessing firearms. Lying about it on Form 4473 is a separate felony. The penalties are severe, up to 10 years in federal prison for the false statement, plus additional charges for illegal possession if you already own guns. Courts don't care if you think the restraining order is unfair. If it meets federal criteria, meaning it was issued after a hearing where you had notice and opportunity to participate, and it restrains you from harassing or threatening an intimate partner or child, you're prohibited. Period. Here's what you must do. First, if you're involved in any domestic dispute, divorce, or custody case, check immediately if any restraining orders or protection orders have been filed against you. Second, understand that even temporary orders can prohibit gun ownership. Third, if a restraining order is issued, you must surrender any firearms you currently own within the time frame specified by your state, usually 24 to 48 hours. Fourth, do not attempt to purchase a firearm while under any active order. Fifth, consult a lawyer who specializes in gun rights to understand when your rights can be restored. And sixth, if the restraining order is lifted or expires, get written documentation from the court before attempting to purchase again. Bring that documentation to the gun store to prove you're no longer prohibited. Restraining orders is a hidden trap, but what you're about to hear next is even more common, and it involves your past. Number 4. Failing to disclose past criminal charges or convictions because you think they don't count. You were arrested 15 years ago for a misdemeanor. The case was dismissed, or you completed probation and you think it's behind you. You're filling out Form 4473, and Question 11B asks if you've ever been convicted of a crime punishable by more than 1 year in prison. You check no because you think misdemeanors don't count, or because the charge was dismissed. Here's the reality. Federal law looks at the maximum possible sentence for the crime, not what you actually received. If your misdemeanor carried a potential sentence of more than 1 year, even if you only got probation, you may be prohibited. And if you were convicted of a misdemeanor crime of domestic violence, you're federally prohibited regardless of sentence length. Lying about past convictions on Form 4473 is a federal felony, 10 years in prison and $250,000 in fines. The ATF cross-references your answers with criminal databases. If there's a mismatch, you're facing charges. In 2024, multiple first-time buyers were prosecuted for failing to disclose old convictions they thought were irrelevant. Here's how to handle this correctly. First, before attempting to purchase a firearm, obtain a complete copy of your criminal record from your state and the FBI. Second, for every past arrest or charge, research the maximum possible sentence for that offense, not what you received, but what the law allowed. Third, if you have any domestic violence convictions, even misdemeanors, assume you're federally prohibited. Fourth, if you're unsure whether a past charge disqualifies you, consult a gun rights attorney before filling out Form 4473. Fifth, never guess or assume on the form if you're uncertain. Disclose it and let the background check determine eligibility. And sixth, if you were convicted but later had the conviction expunged or set aside, understand that federal law may still consider it a conviction unless your rights were specifically restored. Get legal documentation proving restoration before purchasing. Your criminal past can haunt you, but this next mistake happens in real time at the gun store, and it's shockingly easy to commit. Number 5. Purchasing a handgun across state lines without going through a licensed dealer in your home state. You live in California, but you're visiting family in Nevada. You walk into a Nevada gun store and see a handgun you love at a great price. You think, I'll just buy it here and bring it home. The dealer runs your background check, and you purchase the gun. You just committed a federal felony under 18 U.S.C. 922 A3 and 922 B3. You cannot purchase a handgun from a dealer in a state where you don't reside. Long guns have different rules, but handguns must be transferred through a dealer in your home state. Even if both states allow the purchase, federal law prohibits the direct transfer. Violating interstate transfer laws carries up to 5 years in federal prison. The ATF tracks these purchases, and when you try to register the gun in your home state, or if it's ever traced, you'll face charges. This isn't a gray area, it's explicitly illegal, and federal prosecutors pursue these cases aggressively. Here's the legal process. If you want to purchase a handgun in another state, the out-of-state dealer must ship the firearm to a licensed dealer in your home state. You then complete the background check and take possession from your home state dealer. Yes, this adds cost and time, but it's the only legal method. For long guns, federal law allows interstate purchases if the transaction complies with the laws of both states, but you must still go through licensed dealers. Never attempt a private sale across state lines. All interstate transfers must involve FFLs. If you're moving to a new state and bringing guns, research that state's registration and permit requirements immediately. Some states require you to register within days of establishing residency. And if you're an active military stationed in another state, special rules apply. Consult a gun rights attorney to understand your legal residence for purchasing purposes. Interstate purchases are a federal trap, but what I'm about to tell you next could cost you your freedom before you even leave the parking lot. Number 6. Buying a gun legally, then immediately transferring it to someone who can't legally own firearms. You just bought your first gun legally. Your roommate mentions he'd love to try it at the range. You hand it to him, not knowing he has a felony conviction from 10 years ago. Or your brother-in-law asks to borrow it for home protection, and you don't know he's under a restraining order. The moment you transfer possession of that firearm to a prohibited person, even temporarily, even for 5 minutes, you've committed a federal felony under 18 U.S.C. 922D. It doesn't matter that you didn't know their status. Federal law holds you responsible for ensuring anyone you transfer a gun to is legally allowed to possess it. Transferring a firearm to a prohibited person carries up to 10 years in federal prison. If that person uses the gun in a crime, you're facing additional charges and potential civil liability. The ATF will trace the gun back to you as the purchaser of record, and you'll be the first person they investigate. Ignorance is not a defense. I didn't know won't keep you out of prison. Here's how to protect yourself. First, never let anyone else handle, borrow, or take possession of your firearm unless you're absolutely certain they're legally allowed to own guns. Second, if someone asks to borrow your gun, the answer is no. Direct them to purchase their own or rent one at a range. Third, if you're at a range and want to let someone try your gun under your direct supervision, that's generally legal, but they must still be legally eligible to possess firearms. Fourth, never leave your gun accessible to anyone else in your home. Use a safe or lock. Fifth, if you're selling a gun privately, many states require background checks even for private sales. Check your state law, and when in doubt, transfer through a licensed dealer who will run the background check. And sixth, if you discover someone in your household is prohibited, you must ensure they cannot access your firearms. Separate storage with locks is mandatory. Illegal transfers destroy lives, but this next mistake happens during the purchase itself, and it involves something you might think is completely legal. Number 7. Purchasing a firearm with the intent to immediately modify it in ways that violate federal law. You buy a pistol, and you've already researched how to add a stabilizing brace or forward grip to make it more tactical. Or you purchase an AR-15 and plan to install a bump stock or auto sear you found online. Here's what first-time buyers don't understand. Certain modifications transform a legal firearm into an illegal weapon under the National Firearms Act. Adding a vertical foregrip to a pistol can reclassify it as an any other weapon, requiring ATF registration and a $200 tax stamp. Installing a bump stock is federally illegal as of 2019, and converting any semi-automatic firearm to full auto without proper ATF licensing is a 10-year federal felony. If you purchase with intent to make these modifications, you're committing a crime the moment you buy. The legal modifications carry 10 years in federal prison and $250,000 in fines. Possession of an unregistered NFA weapon adds another 10 years. The ATF monitors online forums, social media, and parts purchases. If they find evidence you planned illegal modifications before purchasing, they'll charge you with conspiracy. Multiple first-time gun owners are currently serving prison sentences for modifications they thought were legal. Here's how to stay legal. First, before making any modifications to your firearm, research federal and state laws governing that specific change. Second, understand that pistol braces, foregrips, suppressors, short-barreled rifles, and short-barreled shotguns are all regulated under the NFA and may require registration and tax stamps. Third, never purchase parts or accessories that convert a semi-automatic to full automatic. These are illegal for civilians regardless of registration. Fourth, if you want to add a suppressor or create a short-barreled rifle, you must file ATF Form 1 or Form 4, pay the tax stamp, and wait for approval before making the modification. Fifth, Join gun forums and communities carefully. Don't post about plan modifications that could be illegal, as ATF monitors these spaces. And sixth, when in doubt, consult a gun rights attorney or contact the ATF directly for a determination letter before modifying. It's better to wait and verify than to face federal charges. Illegal modifications send people to prison, but what I'm about to reveal next is a mistake that happens in the first 60 seconds of ownership. Number 8. Walking out of the gun store immediately after purchase in a state that requires waiting periods or instant registration. You pass the federal background check, pay for your gun, and start to walk out with it. The dealer stops you and says, "You can't take it today, there's a 10-day waiting period." You get angry, thinking you passed the check, so it's yours. Or worse, you're in a state like California, Hawaii, or Illinois that requires registration within a specific time frame, and you ignore it because you think registration is optional. Under state law, violating waiting periods or failing to register can result in criminal charges, confiscation of your firearm, and loss of your right to own guns in that state. State-level violations carry penalties ranging from misdemeanors to felonies depending on jurisdiction. California charges illegal possession as a misdemeanor with up to 1 year in jail and $1,000 fines for first offenses. Hawaii requires registration within 5 days. Failure is a misdemeanor. These convictions can trigger federal prohibitions, meaning one state-level mistake costs you gun rights nationwide. Here's what you must do. First, before purchasing, research your state's specific requirements for waiting periods, registration, permits, and background checks. Second, understand that even if you pass the federal NICS check, your state may impose additional waiting periods, typically 3 to 10 days. Third, in states requiring registration, complete the process within the mandated time frame, usually 5 to 30 days depending on the state. Fourth, keep all documentation, your receipt, background check confirmation, and registration paperwork. Fifth, if you move to a new state, research that state's requirements immediately. Some states require you to register guns you're bringing in within days of establishing residency. And sixth, never assume that because you legally purchased in one state, you can legally possess in another. States like New York, New Jersey, California, and Massachusetts have strict laws that can make your legal gun illegal the moment you cross state lines. State laws are a minefield, but this final mistake is the most dangerous because it happens after you think everything is done. Number 9. Storing your newly purchased firearm in a way that allows prohibited persons or children to access it. You bring your first gun home and put it in your nightstand for quick access. What you don't know is that your teenage son has a friend who's been adjudicated as a juvenile delinquent, making him prohibited, or your spouse has an old misdemeanor domestic violence conviction you're unaware of. That friend finds your gun while visiting, or your spouse handles it, and you've just facilitated illegal possession under 18 U.S.C. 922D. Even worse, if a child accesses your unsecured firearm and someone gets hurt, you're facing criminal charges in states with child access prevention laws. 27 states have laws holding gun owners criminally liable when children gain access to unsecured firearms. Criminal liability for improper storage varies by state but can include felony charges, prison time up to 5 years, and massive civil liability if someone is injured or killed. If a prohibited person accesses your gun and commits a crime, you're facing federal charges for facilitating illegal possession, 10 years in prison. Your homeowner's insurance won't cover criminal penalties, and civil lawsuits can bankrupt you. Here's how to protect yourself and others. First, invest in a quality gun safe or lockbox immediately. This is not optional. Second, never leave firearms unsecured, even in your own home. Third, use trigger locks or cable locks as a secondary safety measure, especially if you have children or visitors. Fourth, store ammunition separately from firearms in a locked container. Fifth, if anyone in your household is prohibited from possessing firearms due to criminal history, restraining orders, mental health adjudications, or age, you must ensure they cannot access your guns under any circumstances. Sixth, educate everyone in your household about gun safety, even if they're not allowed to handle firearms. And seventh, if you have children, take them to a gun safety course so they understand the dangers and know never to touch a gun without your permission. Remember, you are legally responsible for securing your firearms. One moment of carelessness can result in tragedy and criminal charges. Those are the 9 mistakes that cost first-time buyers their freedom. Now, let's make sure you remember them. Let's recap the 9 gun purchasing mistakes that could land you in federal prison. Mistake number 1. Lying on Form 4473, even by accident, 10 years in prison. Mistake number 2. Making a straw purchase for someone else, 15 years in prison. Mistake. Number 3. Purchasing while under a restraining order, 10 years in prison. Mistake. Number 4. Not disclosing past criminal charges, 10 years in prison. Mistake. Number 5. Purchasing handguns across state lines illegally, 5 years in prison. Mistake. Number 6. Transferring to a prohibited person, 10 years in prison. Mistake. Number 7. Purchasing with intent to modify illegally, 10 years in prison. Mistake. Number 8. Ignoring waiting periods and registration, state felony charges. Mistake. Number 9. Improper storage, allowing prohibited access, criminal and civil liability. Any one of these mistakes could cost you $250,000 in fines, years in federal prison, and your right to own firearms forever. These aren't scare tactics, these are real consequences happening to real people right now. First-time buyers are going to prison because they didn't know these rules. Don't let confusion about gun laws cost you your freedom. Subscribe to Guns Law Guide so you never miss an update that could keep you legal and protected. I break down complex federal and state gun laws every week so you can own and carry with complete confidence. Hit that subscribe button right now. Next week, I'm covering the 7 ATF rules that turn legal gun owners into felons overnight. You won't want to miss it.